The house stood quietly at the end of a narrow lane, where the evening light always seemed to linger a little longer. Its walls were old but steady, painted in a soft, fading shade of cream. A neem tree leaned gently over the courtyard, its leaves whispering with the wind, as if sharing stories no one else could hear. Inside the house lived a 70-year-old woman. Her days moved slowly, like the ticking of the clock that hung above the doorway. Each second passed with a soft, steady sound, never hurried, never delayed. She had grown used to that rhythm. It had become the sound of her life. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise. She would sit on the edge of her bed for a moment, letting her feet find the cool floor, as if reminding herself that the day had begun. Then she would walk carefully to the kitchen, boil water for tea, and watch the steam rise in gentle curls. There was no one to call out to. No one to ask, "Have you woken up?" No one to answer, "Yes, I'm coming." She lived alone. Once that house had been full of noise, laughter, small arguments, and the sound of running feet. Her 3 sons had grown up within those walls. She had watched them take their first steps in that very courtyard, had fed them with her own hands, had stayed awake through long nights when they were sick. Time had passed as it always does. Her sons grew older. They studied, worked, and eventually got married. One by one they moved away. First to nearby areas, then to distant cities. At first they visited often. They brought gifts, stayed for a few days, filled the house again with laughter. But slowly the visits became shorter, then less frequent, then rare. And now, sometimes months passed without a single visit. The woman never complained. She would simply sit by the window in the evenings, looking out at the lane. Sometimes she imagined she heard footsteps, familiar footsteps. But when she looked closely, there was no one there. She would smile softly to herself, as if forgiving the illusion. Her routine never changed. After tea, she would sweep the courtyard, even though it hardly gathered any dust. She would water the plants carefully, speaking to them in a low voice, as though they understood her words. "You must be thirsty," she would say. "Here, drink slowly." By afternoon, she would sit on a wooden chair near the doorway, knitting something small, though she had no one to give it to. Her hands moved from memory, repeating patterns she had learned long ago. In the quiet hours of the day, memories would come. Not loudly, not painfully, just softly, like distant music. She would remember her sons as children, how they fought over small things, how they laughed together, how they would call her Amma again and again until she answered. She never allowed the memories to stay too long. She would gently push them away, like closing a window before the wind grows too strong. One evening, as the sky turned pale orange, something unusual happened. There was a knock on the door. It was not loud, just a simple, careful knock. The woman paused. For a moment she did not move. She listened, as if making sure it was real. Then slowly, she stood up and walked toward the door. When she opened it, she saw a young boy standing there. He looked around 10 years old. His clothes were clean but worn, and his eyes carried a quiet uncertainty. "Amma," he said softly, as if unsure whether he should use that word. The woman looked at him with calm curiosity. "Yes?" she asked gently. I was passing by," the boy said. "I felt thirsty. Can I have some water?" The woman nodded without hesitation. "Of course," she said. "Come inside." The boy stepped into the courtyard, looking around with quiet wonder. The neem tree, the old walls, the stillness, it all seemed new to him. She brought him a glass of water. He drank slowly, carefully, as if trying not to waste a single drop. "Thank you," he said. The woman smiled. "You are welcome," she replied. The boy hesitated, then asked, "Do you live here alone?" The question hung in the air for a moment. "Yes," she said simply. The boy nodded, but his expression changed slightly. There was something like understanding in his eyes, something deeper than his age. "My grandmother used to live alone," he said quietly. "Before she passed away." The woman did not respond immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the chair. "Sit for a while," she said. "It is still warm outside." The boy sat. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It felt natural, like a shared pause between two people who did not need many words. As the evening deepened, the boy began to talk, slowly at first, then more freely. He spoke about his school, his friends, the small struggles of his daily life. The woman listened, not just with her ears but with her whole presence. It had been a long time since someone had spoken to her like that, not out of duty, not out of politeness, but simply to be heard. When the sky turned darker, the boy stood up. "I should go now," he said. The woman nodded. "Yes, you should," she replied. He paused at the door. "Can I come again?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried a quiet weight. The woman looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled. "Yes," she said. "You can come again." And he did. The next day, he returned in the afternoon. Then again the day after that. Slowly, his visits became part of her routine. He would come after school, sometimes with stories, sometimes just with silence. He would sit in the courtyard, help her water the plants, or watch her knit. The house began to feel different. Not louder, but warmer. The clock still ticked the same way. The neem tree still whispered in the wind. But now there was another presence. Small, steady, and real. One day, as they sat together, the boy asked, "Do your sons visit you?" The woman paused. "Sometimes," she said. "Do you miss them?" he asked. She looked at the ground for a moment, then at the tree, then back at the boy. "Yes," she said softly. "But I also understand." The boy frowned slightly. "I don't understand," he said. The woman smiled gently. "When people grow," she said, "their lives become full in different ways. They carry many responsibilities. Sometimes they forget to look back." He paused. "But that does not mean they do not care." The boy listened carefully. "Do you believe that?" he asked. The woman thought for a moment. Then she said, "I choose to believe it." Days turned into weeks. The boy's presence became as natural as the morning tea, as the evening light, as the sound of the clock. And then, one afternoon, something changed. Car stopped outside the house. It was unfamiliar. The woman stood near the doorway, watching. 3 men stepped out. For a moment, she did not recognize them. Then slowly she did. Her sons. They looked older, more tired, more distant than she remembered. But they were still her sons. They walked toward the house, hesitating slightly, as if unsure how to begin. Before they could speak, the boy ran into the courtyard. "Amma," he called. The word echoed in the air. The sons froze. They looked at the boy, then at their mother. A quiet understanding passed between them, unspoken but clear. The eldest son stepped forward. "Amma," he said, his voice softer than expected. The woman looked at them calmly. "You have come," she said. There was no accusation in her voice. No anger. Just a simple acknowledgement. They entered the house. For a while no one spoke much. The silence was heavier than before, filled with things left unsaid for too long. Then, slowly, the conversation began. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But gently. They spoke about their lives, their work, their families. They asked about her health, her routine. They noticed small things. The worn chair, the quiet rooms, the simplicity of her days. And they noticed the boy. "Who is he?" one of them asked. The woman looked at the boy, who stood quietly near the doorway. "He is someone who needed water," she said. And stayed for conversation. The sons exchanged glances. Something shifted in their expressions. Perhaps it was realization. Perhaps it was regret. Perhaps both. That evening they stayed longer than planned. They helped her prepare dinner. They sat together in the courtyard. For the first time in a long while, the house felt full again. But it was different now. Quieter. More aware. Before leaving, the sons made a promise to visit more often. The woman listened. She did not question the promise. She simply nodded. After they left, the boy looked at her. "Are you happy?" he asked. The woman sat down slowly. She looked at the doorway where her sons had stood. Then she looked at the boy. Yes, she said. But not because they came, she added gently. The boy tilted his head. Then why? He asked. The woman smiled. Because I learned something, she said. What? The boy asked. She looked at the neem tree, its leaves moving softly in the night breeze. That even when life becomes quiet, she said, it is not empty. He paused. There is always room for something new to enter. The boy smiled. And the night settled gently around the house. The clock continued its steady ticking. The tree continued its soft whisper. And inside the small, quiet home, there was no longer just loneliness. There was presence. There was understanding. And there was a calm, steady kind of love that needed no words.